Hello, good morning. Welcome everybody to this second panel of Nextv content distribution Latin America, which we have titled How to Integrate OTTs and the New D2Cs. My name is Juan Pablo Conti, and I am the Content and Audience Development Manager for the Americas at Dataxis. So we're going to talk about OTT super aggregation, and for that we have a panel very representative of the basic ecosystem that is required to generate a super aggregated TV content experience. That ecosystem needs at least three key elements. It needs a pay TV or an MVPD operator, the super aggregator role. It needs a number of content suppliers with their own OTT services, the super aggregated apps, and it needs a software platform that allows the multiple app suppliers to integrate their content, the operator to manage, provision, and monitor everything that is going on, and of course, the end users to access and enjoy their favorite TV shows. So let's introduce our three panelists, three executives with a lot of experience in the industry, who are again representing these three key pillars of super aggregation. First, to provide us with the operator view, we have Mónica González Piris. She's the head of content acquisition at Digicel Group. Digicel, I'm sure most of you will know, one of the main operators in the Caribbean, operating in a lot of the countries, islands and territories there. She's based out of Miami in Florida. From the content provision side, we have, and we're welcoming Sebastian Schneider. He's the VP Distribution and Account Management LATAM at Stars. Stars, most of you again will know, a Lionsgate company, a long tradition of premium TV service provision, originally in the States, these days increasingly a growing global OTT service provider as well. And Sebastian is based out of Santa Monica in California. Our three panelists today based in the States. And our technology expert today is Greg Riker. He's the head of sales and business development for the Americas at Metrological. He's based out of the Denver, Colorado area. Metrological, a Comcast company, it's a company that is based in the Netherlands and has offices in the US and Europe. And again, he will be our sort of expert voice from a technology point of view during this discussion. So let's start, and I'd like to start both with Mónica and Sebastian. You know, historically in Latin America, there's been a tradition of following what's happening in the US pay TV industry and sort of imitating what's happening there in terms of technology developments and trends, usually with a delay of 1 or 2 years. And specifically, pay TV companies look at what Comcast, the largest provider, is doing there to see where things are going. If we have a look today at how Comcast is approaching super aggregation, you can very rapidly see that it has around 30 SVOD apps already added into its OTT platform. So my first question is, why do you think in Latin America are operators only integrating no more than 3 or 4 SVOD services on average, again, in the best of cases? Why such a difference? Mónica, let's start with you.
Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the reason why we have only 3 or 4 apps compared to this giant content aggregation that's occurring in Comcast is because in order for an app to be successful in our markets, there needs to be critical mass, right? And in order for that to happen, our markets right now are fragmented and we have cultural sensitivities that we don't necessarily have in the US. So those are limiting factors, and that's why we have to focus on the 3 to 4 apps versus the 30 that are available via Comcast.
Okay, good point. Sebastián?
So first, thank you, Juan Pablo, and everybody in Nextv for having me in this panel. I'm really excited to have this conversation along with Monica, Greg, and you today. So for the answer, I think that there are different factors that might weigh in for a better answer, and not in a particular order. I'm thinking about, first of all, would be technical. So there's a limited time and resources constraint, both on the partner, who creates the content provider and the operator. Both sides do have a backlog of integration, and there's this timing and resources constraint. And also, I guess that there are some complexities in terms of the integration. There's no like standardized way to do so, and they might not happen so fast as we would like. The second one would be regarding availability. I think that we need to be mindful in Latin America that there's a still significant number of set-top boxes that are not connected to the internet. And this reduces the addressable market to consume these SVOD services. So that might be, this point in particular might be one of those points that for many operators, they might not be so interested into moving forward broadly with all of the SVOD services that might be available. And the third one is regarding the business. I think that pay TV is still solid as a business in Latin America. So the decision to invest in resources, timing, replacing these set-top boxes might not be as fast, and therefore that might reduce the quantity of services. So I think that both for operators and for the content providers, these are some of the hurdles that they need to pass in order for increasing the quantity of services available.
Greg, based in part of this view, both from Monica and Sebastian, do you expect this current relatively low number of SVOD apps integrated by Latin American operators to grow in the near future? And perhaps more broadly, what's your view on why in the US you have such a rich ecosystem of OTT integration at the time? What's driving it there, so we could try to understand if it could be replicated here somehow?
Right. Yeah. Well, by the way, welcome to my backyard. So I'm sorry if you hear birds and dogs, but I'm outside today. But you know, I think
birds of dogs. Yes.
Exactly. The two answers previously were spot on, right? That when I look at fragmentation, it's fragmentation of subscriber base, right? Small populations of subscribers fragmented across multiple regions and areas. And then you've got technology fragmentation. And I think, you know, what we're seeing at least, and what that drives is not only, you know, technical difficulties across the board, whereas the US, we pretty much have a standardized kind of technology stack that makes it easier to kind of bring this forward and bring these things to market. But, you know, just as important, or probably more importantly, it's the priority of the apps guys, right? They look at where are they going to get the most bang for their buck in terms of viewership and eyeballs, and there's effort on their part. So they have to prioritize, right? What are the markets that are available, and then how much effort is it going to take to get into those markets with their partnership with the MVPDs? So you've got this technology issue. Can we get it done? We're seeing now with standardization of different, you know, web browsers and technologies, and companies like Metrological can solve the technology problems, and we are solving those problems across the board. But I think more importantly is how do you adjust the priority of the apps guys to go into the region, and whether that's licensing of content, because there's a lot of the content that's not available there that it would be in other areas in the world. So that needs to kind of almost be renegotiated, if you will, but it's also the priority on that side. So you look at kind of the major apps guys right now, and they're hitting the biggest markets first, right? It's Brazil, it's Argentina, it's Chile, it's Mexico, and then prioritizing further down. I think as you know, technology starts to become easier to implement and integrate, so there's not as many resources required to do the things that you need to do to bring these apps, that priority list starts to change a little bit because it's not as hard. So you don't need the resources on the apps guys. You don't necessarily need the resources on the MVPD side. So that intersection really makes it easier. And I think over the last couple of years, we're starting to see that happen. But truth be told, Latin America is further behind on the technology paradigm, right? Lower end set-top box, networks that aren't necessarily capable of driving some of these things. All of that's changing, right? With the push of broadband and all of these others and these new devices and smart TV adoption and all of this. So I think, is it hard now? Yes, I think it's starting to change and evolve. Honestly, what we're seeing is a lot of local content that's starting to drive the value proposition, where they can actually bring this local content where the rights aren't necessarily an issue, where you can focus on these cultural, language, just regional differences and really target your customer base. So we're starting to see that adoption start to pick up and move much faster as everyone else is kind of waiting for the big dogs, right? And I think you see the larger apps guys really wanting to push and penetrate into these other markets. And now it's just a matter of time. I think we're starting to see that happen. So it's technology, it's license, it's priority, but that window's starting to shrink a little bit. So
okay, thanks for that. Monica, what are the main difficulties that an operator such as Digicel must overcome to integrate the main SVOD apps into its set-top boxes?
So as Digicel, we have various touch points, both inside and outside the home. So we have, the ability of mobile, we have the ability of Wi-Fi, broadband, smart TVs, and through our My Digicel app, we allow for the subscriber or our customers to have the ease of use and access to all these apps.
Okay. Sebastian, Stars is a very interesting case because it is one of the top 5 premium pay TV networks in the US, but in Latin America, it never actually launched as a premium channel. And some of Stars' most popular content, thinking of Outlander, for example, has been watched on other premium channels in the region. Why did you decide to launch an OTT service in Latin America? What was the motivation for it?
So I would say that the short answer would be global growth and global scale, right? But if we analyze the trajectory of Stars and going out to the global market, the global landscape, let's first understand that the strategy before 2018 or till 2018 was about licensing content outside of the US. But then we decided, okay, there's a huge business, there's scale that we can harness. We are a huge company, Lionsgate, with films, originals, production, Stars as well. So we decided in 2018 to start with this distribution. First, it happened in the UK and Germany with Amazon. Then it was expanded to Latin America with the Apple TV app in May 2019 approximately. And from there on, we have now a wide distribution across Mexico and Brazil. Also launched our direct-to-consumer in Argentina, Colombia, and Chile. And we are going to continue launching in other countries. So, Juan Pablo, I would say that, we launched our premium TV service OTT and just OTT, mostly in alignment with where the industry is headed from a technological perspective, from consumer behaviors, and also from the global expansion that we would like to have.
Okay. Monica, when Greg was mentioning the different causes behind this sort of gap between what's happening in Latam versus the US, broadband accessibility was one of the factors he highlighted, and I'm thinking it would be valuable from you and from an operator point of view to hear your view on this current phenomenon that we're seeing across Latin America, where we have a sort of boom of operators going with fiber to the home deployment. This is happening across Latin America. So they are deploying this very strong broadband connectivity, but then they need to decide on the ideal model for the video offering, which is used usually as a way to complement or to provide value added to their connectivity. Do you think it's possible in those scenarios for these new operators to build an offer based entirely on aggregation of TV apps?
Yeah, that's a complex question. So we have more broadband and mobile users than TV users, and that's a reality. We need to be in that space. We need to offer these products. Having said that, TV will always be there as well, right? So we're allowing for our customers to have the option and ultimately decide what they want to do. So they have both product offerings.
Okay. Sebastian, what would you say are the main difficulties for an OTT to be integrated into the platforms of pay TV operators? And I'm thinking both from a technical and from a commercial standpoint.
So it's the $1 million question, right? It's technical or commercial, but somebody needs to take the blame. So, I mean, integrations or asset delivery that are the main two ways that content can be placed in an operator, they do take some time. So it's not just about like meeting or agreeing to the specifications, but also taking in consideration that there is a PC backlog into both sides of this partnership, and there are the other priorities, as Greg also had mentioned. So I would say that for these reasons, I mean, the commercial terms, they always take time, but there's like not a lot to create new stories in that part. So I would say that the biggest difficulties might be around the technical side on this moment.
Okay, and we have an expert here for that. So Greg, how can a content provider launch a TV app and overcome the different integration barriers with operators?
Well, I mean, you can look at the app space in really kind of two buckets, right? You can look at it from and this is primarily broadband and on the video side, and not mobile. So I want to kind of differentiate that just a little bit. You know, what we're seeing is there's either two options for integration. There's a native integration where you've got a big bunch of code and a big, thing. It's NRDP for like Netflix, for example, ADK for Disney, for example, that really sits on this device, that requires a lot of integration, a lot of people involved in that integration throughout the technical chain, if you will. And then you've got the other camp, which is really web-based apps, right? But there's still technical challenges on that side. They require a browser, and that browser needs to support the functionality of the app and those types of things. And what we're seeing is the adoption of kind of moving closer to that web delivery of apps, leveraging technology, all open source technology, something called Lightning that's out there. That's a very small footprint, small payload type of JavaScript technology, which is basically HTML5, just kind of a little bit more efficient and less requirements on the set-top box. So they're able to hit more devices on that right end in terms of the web-based apps than they will if they are on the native side. And when you start to do that, then they start to speed up those integrations that Sebastian had mentioned, all of this backlog of different things. And once you're able to, be able to deliver things at a higher level, meaning less touch points, less integration, faster turnaround, and more eyeballs, right? That starts to make things a lot easier. And I will agree with them. In the early days, I would always blame the licensing aspect of it. It was hard from the licensing because everyone had to renegotiate their deals because of the OTT stuff. And I think all of the content guys have kind of figured that out. And now it really does sit on the technology side. So, the adoption of new standards, the evolution of technology, and just the ability to deliver an experience on a web-based delivery versus a native delivery we're seeing that happen more and more. So if I look at it from a metrological standpoint, there's really one or two main apps that are I don't see leaving native anytime soon. And those are really the two big ones, right? Netflix and YouTube. And I think everyone else is starting to adopt and to conform to some of this more web standard-based type of delivery because they can get more set time. And this is worldwide, right? They can get lower performant devices, right? You don't have to hit these devices, lower bandwidth requirements, but yet still deliver the experience that the app guys require and the consumer requires. So, as that starts to move, and we're seeing that, within every major operator here in the U.S. and most operators in Europe, that push for web delivery of apps. As long as the controls there for everyone, as long as the data is there for everyone, and as long as the experience is there for the consumer, that's really going to speed up the and overcome a lot of the challenges that exist. And that's happening today. I mean, we're seeing it. You had mentioned a couple operators in the U.S. They're already adopting that, which is why they can deliver hundreds of apps to multiple ranges of devices because of the adoption of that.
Interesting. Sebastian, if you think of content owners that are new to the industry, what would you recommend these days? That they build a linear pay TV channel, or do you think these days they're better off starting directly as an OTT platform that can be integrated with operators?
It's a difficult question, and it depends. I don't think that there is one size fits all, because for the content creators, it depends on which kind of content do you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sports, entertainment, and factual, they're completely different strategies that you're gonna be willing to do in the region. But I mean, talking about like major tendencies, the OTT distribution will continue to grow. And but on the other hand, it's undeniable that pay TV is still there. It's a solid business. So again, there's not an easy answer for this. I would say that there's other things that are needed to be assessed in order to answer this question, and you need to consider which are the countries that you're going to be onboarding, particular region in particular as well, which is your competitors, the broadband availability that you're going to on these markets, and finally the addressable market. I mean, the easy answer would say, yeah, the industry is mostly growing for the OTT platforms, for sure.
The reality is still you risk leaving a huge market outside of your distribution, right?
Yeah, and it's still profitable as well.
Monica, for Caribbean operators, even before this era of super aggregated streaming content, there were a series of difficulties connected with procuring and sourcing linear TV programming, right? Do you want to tell us a bit about how difficult it has traditionally been in that area?
Yeah, it is challenging to license content in the Caribbean, but we have found a good mix, right? So it's not only international, as Greg previously mentioned, we have gone more regional, we have gone more local. So we've gone to the point that we have proprietary channels that we program ourselves with this variables of, international, the mix, international, regional, and local. We also launched our own OTT app, which is called PlayGo, and that also offers this mixture that it makes it relevant and gives a competitive product to our customers.
Okay. Greg, can the integration of an app TV offer help operators enhance their traditional channel lineup, do you think?
Yeah, I think from the data that we see, and I think you're going to have to ask the MVPDs on this more than anything else. The data we see, the answer is absolutely yes, right? I mean, with new program series coming out or different episodes coming out, people want to catch up to those episodes based on some of the linear stuff that they're seeing. Almost the catch-up TV kind of days, right? But actually going further back in the VOD to kind of understand, where these different series and episodes are. I think a really good example that we see could be NFL Network, to be honest with you, at least here in the U.S. NFL Network, U.S. football games, linear distribution initially, but they've launched and it's been around for a while, but in their app, they've got something, I think it's called Gamecast, which allows people to come back and either rewatch a game or watch a game that they couldn't see on linear. And it's really kind of complementing, the NFL broadcast, and even some of the, CBS, NBC, Fox broadcast as well. That's a pay for play service. I know it's very popular, and I see, for Latin America, the true, World Cup's coming, and we're seeing a lot of the providers here looking at how they can have enhanced apps with the linear stuff as well. So again, the data that we see, and of course, being in the app business, I want to raise my hands up and say yes, of course. But I do think that we are seeing at least the adoption of this and the usage that's being driven on it. So data says yes, but obviously Monica could probably answer this better than I can. But from my perspective, yes, yes, yes.
Monica, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, as far as data, we can we have the privacy laws, right? So it's kind of complicated to really comment in greater detail because we have to maintain certain things. But I do agree overall with him. Yeah.
Okay. And Greg, one of the big challenges with App TV integration, it's integrating the content into a unified content search and discovery experience that doesn't really mean the user has to keep then switching from one application to the next one to access the different options in the menu. Have we made any progress on this front, on content search and discovery?
Yeah, I think Sebastian had said he mentioned the $1 million question, right? And I think, at least from my perspective, this is the $1 million question from where we kind of sit. Absolutely, right? I mean, unified search and recommendation is key across linear, VOD, and app side. And I think, you see a lot of this. You're starting to see huge improvements with this. There's a couple operators around the world that have a very good voice remote capability that really does cross apps and cross all of the different distribution methods. It's all about the metadata, right? And it's about normalizing metadata and having it into a place that allows you to do to have this very complex search and recommendation associated with it. Initially a lot of that was wrapped around the rights, right? If the MVPD could get the rights to the metadata and include it into their service, that was the only way to really do that. We've seen huge improvements on that across all of our customer base in terms of getting access to the metadata. I think we're seeing everybody really understand the best way to surface all of this content is through search and recommendation and voice and those type of things. And the only way to do that is to have that integration. And I think you used to see a lot of these silos, right? Everyone wanted to kind of be very tight, and just from a user experience, that became very laborious and difficult and complex, really. You'd have to almost know what you're asking for to get what you want, or have a very specific profile. And there's a lot of things that were thrown at you that weren't necessarily relevant. And I think the search and rec guys are doing a really good job at it. I think the MVPDs are doing a really, really good job at consolidating all of that, and now just offering different ways to surface this content. And whether it's through profiles, through social, through lots of different things. But yeah, it's been really good. I think it's happening now very, very quickly.
Sebastian, what is the importance of user consumption data when it comes to designing the programming strategy of a content supplier? Do you work with that here in Latin America? Do you use consumption data to drive your programming strategy?
Yes, for sure. Yes, totally. Data is always tremendously relevant. We do have these consumption data dashboards that will compare like a title of a premiere with a past premiere that we have done in the past in other years also, or into other markets. So that will give us a really great insight into performance. So we also incorporate other third-party data that and would compare into how have we done with that particular genre or with that title in particular with others in the region. So that also helps us. And for sure, yeah, we harness into all of this data to then take some decisions into our programming strategy, both for programming and also for acquisitions and for which are going to be the next originals from our platform.
So there's no, these days, those old days of having a hunch in terms of this content might work, it's not so much the reality, right? It's all a data-driven decision process.
Well, it's not so easy, right? Because data can give you like more
mix,
color.
Right?
Yeah, but I would say that that sixth sense into choosing which is the right content, it's something that is going to be challenging to avoid in the future as well. It's part of the art.
Yeah, Monica, you're also an expert in terms of content acquisition. What it would be interesting from an operator point of view to see how you're using data collection and data analysis again to drive programming acquisition from an operator point of view. Do you have access to the same data points that each of the aggregated apps do, and how do you use then that information to develop or fine-tune your content and programming strategy?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the consumer data, we have privacy laws and in our markets that vary, right? We do have access to certain data, for example, what device they might be seeing this on, or how long they've been within a certain app, or what apps they're using. But as far as the detail of the programming, that's on the content side of things, right? So I turn my head to Sebastian, and I'm glad that he uses that data to ensure that the product is amazing and that the content selection is perfect, because then our customer benefits from it, as do we, right? So at this point, we rely heavily on our partnerships with the apps in order to drive the true product, but we can definitely understand what is relevant for us as far as what app is working and what is not.
Okay. I see we have some questions coming from the audience. We'll try to take those before we finish the panel. Greg, what kind of valuable data can operators expect from their customers' app consumption? What are you seeing in that front?
Yeah, I'm off mute. Sorry. From our standpoint, Monica always, she's right. You've got to respect privacy, right? So, we're being based out of the Netherlands. We're bound really by GDPR and very strict, privacy requirements, which is great. So the data that's, I think what we see people using the majority of, it's really asset and device data, right? What's the asset? What's the app? How long are they watching? But it doesn't get more granular than that, at least from being able to share that data. So it's all about, what are the consumers watching? How long are they watching it? And then you start to see profiles created from the MVPD and from the content guys, what content basically is being watched, and then they then what can they offer to their consumers and those type of things. So it's very much like the kind of data that you used to see with the old VOD systems, and it's just, again, with privacy and everything changing and everyone wanting to make sure that we're kind of protected. There's lots of limitation there in terms of how do you leverage it. But I do think the combination of the MVPD and the content owner themselves really partnering together to come up with the right product seems to be working pretty well, because app usage is massive. That what we're seeing, it's just unbelievable to see how many hours a day people are spending on these different apps, right? Which is it's good for us. That means we're putting out a good product for our customers.
Monica, we were just discussing with Greg content recommendation, and really the content recommendation engines and the content that is highlighted on the home screens seem to be a key feature in any advanced OTT video services that we see today. We have even seen musical artists that suddenly have a huge peak in popularity simply because a particular music video was highlighted on the homepage of a large pay TV operator, What is your view on this? What is the importance of content recommendation, and how does it affect content consumption?
Yeah, so I think it's very important, right? Content curation has always been important, even back in the days of VOD, right? So usually whatever you put on the front page is what is seen the most. Now we have an additional benefit. We have artificial intelligence, right? So not only do we have, okay, we pre-selected some things that we think you might like, but additional to that, we also have the artificial intelligence that individualizes that experience for our consumer, right? So we have that benefit. However, we still need the offline promotion, the off-platform promotion to create the awareness, to create the education, to create the know-how of what would be within that app. So I think it's a twofold approach. I think technology has improved, and the curation process, it's always existed, but it's definitely needed.
And Sebastian, and I'll put the same question to Greg. Why do you think so many of the content recommendation systems that we see today are generating or keep generating frustration for users? What is wrong with them? Is it the underlying intelligence of these systems is still immature? Is there a problem with the algorithms? And I think, Greg, you touched on that a little bit. Or is there perhaps a lack of metadata standardization? And again, Greg, you were referring to that. What is the underlying issue or issues here, Sebastian?
So it's not an easy question to answer. I don't think that there is a straightforward way to answer it. What I would say is, well, first of all, it's not my area of expertise because it involves a lot of AI, it involves programming, but I would say that it's super complex to be predicting the subscriber behavior versus, first of all, your actual content library that you have in that particular moment, because that library will not be the same one in the past, neither in the future. And also what is happening in the world right now. So there are like many aspects in order for that algorithm to be working like the way that we would like to. So subjective. So again, I would say that it's not like fully question about the system's like maturity or the metadata. So it's a conjunction of many things that we still need to sort out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add on a little bit, and I might disagree a little bit on the maturity side. I think the early systems that have been installed and deployed, and I'm going to get shot from my friends over at TiVo and Think Analytics, were versions like 1.0, right? And they're now just evolving, right? I mean, they're leveraging all these new technologies, whether it's some of the artificial intelligence algorithms, jumping into these micro social networks, really starting to expand ways to create this ability to surface content that's relevant to us as consumers, right? Having access to different mobile viewing behaviors versus TV viewing behaviors versus whatever happens to be across the board. And I think that's starting to come together, if you will, right? So it's again, I'll be shot saying version 1.0 is kind of out there, but they're really doing a really good job. I think they're moving. We all said that search and recommendation was a commodity just a couple of years ago, and I think now that that's evolving into a much more, it's so important across the board. And I do think metadata standardization is happening. I do think all of these, they're leveraging these new technologies. So and the operators are really pushing for the technology to get to a place where we as consumers feel comfortable with the content that we're getting. So in terms of, and it's so important for the content owners as well. There's so much choice out there, and there's so much noise and so many different ways to consume. It's really important that you've got the ability to say, this content might be relevant to the consumer because he might not know anything about it, right? In terms of, I can think of many different series that I haven't even known about unless I'm part of these, micro social networks that say, oh, have you seen this or have you seen that? I'm like, what? And then I go off and I hunt and I peck. So it's kind of fun, but yeah, I definitely see, I see that it is moving to a very sophisticated area right now, and they're doing a pretty decent job out there. And there's some new companies coming up that are enhancements to this as well that, you know, keep your eyes out for.
Okay. I will take a question from Grace Ortiz. Grace is an analyst coordinator from the Walt Disney Company. She's asking in general to the panel. Hi, she says, so I have a question. I think we haven't talked about the distributor war. Do you think more content that stays mostly in the US has the chance to be in the platforms that are present in LATAM? For example, she says content from Peacock that is not available in LATAM, but its original content are amazing, Grace says. Who would like to? I think, Monica, you want to say something about that? No?
I can say something about that. I can speak as a Caribbean person, and then I'll put my Latin America hat on, okay? Because it's twofold. For Caribbean, we do have access to some of the original productions just by the way that the licensing occurs from the US. So we do have that benefit. Do I think it would work in Latin America? Absolutely. Is it available? It's not, right? So if I were to ask for it, yeah, I think ideally we would do that. And as for Disney Plus, I think that day and date releases in Latin America as it is in the US would be exceptional. I would love to integrate with them, so you can pass that along as well.
Okay. Take a note.
Just throw it out there, Gracie.
The Walt Disney Company. We have Digicel interested in integrating with you, so take notice of that. Sebastian?
Yeah, so actually, Grace was mentioning about Peacock in particular, and we do acquisitions in Stars Play for Peacock, for services that they are not in Latin America, Peacock, Hulu. And for example, right now there is this series that is Dr. Death, starring Christian Slater, Joshua Jackson, and Alec Baldwin, that premiered in the US with Peacock, and it's premiering with us, with Stars Play around the world. So I guess that what Grace is saying, okay, yeah, there's going to be this series or these SVOD services that they are in the US, that they are still not outside of the US. That content will continue to flow to other SVOD services such as us. And in the future, yeah, I guess that there's like an integration that it's happening. So there is a challenge into, okay, which is going to be the content flow for the future. But we'll see the future. We are humans and we are creative, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay, so we're approaching the end of the panel. I'd like to put a general question to all of you. And what do you think, thinking forward, what will be the main challenges in general in content production in Latin America for the future? Monica, let's start with you.
I think we've mentioned it maybe sporadically, right? So we need the mass, we need the popularity. Obviously, we have the technology issues, and we have the language barriers and all of that throughout Latin America, and the fragmentation. But I definitely feel that we do have commonalities, and those are the ones that need to be addressed. So in the future, we always have to find that mix, which I think a lot of the original productions have, coming out of different apps that are now entering the market. So I think they're doing a good job as far as production. I think our quality has been superb, and moving forward, we can only improve.
Okay. Greg?
Yeah, I think, I think the biggest challenges are, first of all, getting that scale of eyeballs, which will drive the scale of content. And then at that point, though, the content has got to be fresh enough and relevant, right? I think we see outside of Latin America that it's really hard to keep your customers engaged right now because there's so much access. So if eyeballs that are there, you get the content owners committed to the region delivering really solid and good content. That's the challenge. I think that's the challenge across the board. And I think Monica hit it. It's all about scale first, right? You've got to get eyes. And once you have those eyes, I think it drives a lot of things. So, from a timeline standpoint, Latin America is a couple of years behind, I would say, North America and some countries in the U.S. I mean, in Europe. I'm sorry. And that timeline can shrink very, very quickly. And I think once that timeline starts to shrink, it's really relevant content and fresh content, and then really just learning how to keep your customers engaged and sticky, because you see a lot of churn happening right now with some of these guys. So it's but I do see that timeline shrinking pretty quickly.
Okay.
Especially for the Caribbean, actually. Good job, Monica.
And Sebastian?
So I would say that first and foremost, the challenge is about availability, and it's about the content itself, but also includes talent. All the talent is so busy because there is a lot of demand for new content. On the other side, I would say that there is a challenge in terms of creating new and diverse stories. It's something that we are seeing as a trend around all the world. Hollywood content is still working, and in our experience, it maybe is what is working best. But anyways, there is an appetite for new content that it's not just Hollywood. And in all, finally, I would say that costs or maybe profitability, and that weighs into, okay, which is this availability of content. So there are many programmers that are paying crazy dollars for these productions, and it doesn't make sense in terms of the expense, and sometimes it's not so realistic, right? And I guess that in time that will come to a reality to what makes sense to do or not to do.
Mm-hmm. Just quickly with each of you, I'd like to see if there's anything in particular that you're working on, or you might want to use this opportunity to make any exciting announcements. What's next for each of your companies, Digital Stars and Metrological? What does the post-pandemic world hold in store for your company and your clients? So final words, first, Monica?
I think we're definitely, or I know we're definitely a digital operator, right? So we're moving towards that space. As I mentioned before, we have more broadband and mobile users than TV. So that's the space we currently occupy, and we will just grow from there.
Okay, thank you. Greg?
Gotcha. Oh, look, you look good, Greg. Look at that. That's Sebastian on there. So Elva, from our standpoint, I guess my message is it can be, these apps can be deployed in every country, in most operators in Latin America. There's lots of open source technology out there. There's companies like Metrological that can help you do that. I think where we're going to see the next push really is around monetization of all of this for the MVPD and for the content owners. So I think what you will see, and what I try to propagate throughout the region is you can do this. You can do this in a time frame that makes sense. You can monetize this experience to help drive your customers into the space. And from my standpoint, just keep asking for apps, keep using these apps. Let's get that Stars apps out there and all that content being driven, and let's get more content into the Caribbean so we can get all our consumers happy and go from there. But yeah, this technology is moving to a place where it is available to really any operator that chooses to move this thing forward.
Okay, thank you. And Sebastian, just final considerations on something exciting happening on Stars. Any new markets, for example?
So in our side, yeah, we're always increasing our distribution, both to new markets. I can't mention right now in which countries and which new distributors are we going to be having our products to reach our audience. So that is happening. Right now, Q4 is going to be really exciting for us because we're going to be, again, new territories, new distributors. So we also have this great slate for this Q4. So everything is coming together. Our user base has continuously been increasing. So we are so happy about the results that we are getting. And that also validates our value proposition. So again, excited to see how this continues growing and continuously increasing our user base and for them to know our value proposition and consume our content.
Very well. This is all the time we have for. Thank you very much to our three panelists, Monica, Greg, Sebastian. Thank you also to our audience. We hope you have enjoyed this session, and we invite you to tune in to our next and final panel of the day, the future of content consumption by children, which will feature speakers from Discovery Latin America, Gigo TV, and Antina. Thank you. See you in a few minutes.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.